Hello and welcome to the daily newspaper analysis. Today we shall be discussing the newspaper of the 31st of January 2018. So coming to the first article, a wider net. The opinion is that as the tax base widens, the finance minister should cut the share of indirect taxes. Now the context of this article is that the tax base has widened and thus the revenues of the government have increased. And this is largely at the behest of two big bang reforms which the government had introduced in the previous years. One is demonetization. It was introduced in the year 2016, in November 2016, and GST, which began from 1st of July 2017. So these are the two reforms in the backdrop of which there has been a widening of tax base. So the basic analysis in this editorial is that how has this tax increased and what should the government do in the aftermath of this increase of tax base? So that is the gist of this editorial. Now coming to the issues which have been analyzed, the first issue is with regards to a formalization of the economy. Now here you need to understand that both these reforms, demonetization and GST, were largely targeted at formalizing the economy. Indian economy was for long criticized for being an informal economy. This resulted in a lot of problems like black money and tax evasion. So now in the aftermath of demonetization, what happened is that people had to exchange their currency from the banks, and for this they had to deposit their money in the banks, as a result of which even the informal sector of the economy has become formalized. Also with regards to GST, the norms for indirect taxes has somehow become more strict now, and as a result of which evasion is something that is difficult, and a large number of businesses have now come under the ambit of GST. So both these steps have indeed resulted in formalization of the economy. And this indeed is a welcome step, and this is a step which has indeed contributed to rising of the tax base and tax revenues in the country. So that is the first analysis. The second analysis is with regards to direct taxes. Now the direct taxes in the country have risen in the backdrop of the move, specifically demonetization move. Now what happened is that in the aftermath of demonetization, the large number of population in India who were largely outside the ambit of the direct taxes came in the ambit of direct taxes. Now you should know some facts that at present, before demonetization, only 4% of the Indian population was paying taxes, and this was a very low figure compared to the magnanimity of the Indian economy. Another thing is that as per government estimates, at least 23% of the population was eligible for payment of direct taxes. So what happened in the aftermath of the demonetization move is that a large section from this 23% came into this ambit of direct tax payment, and these were the 3%, at least 3% people have come into the ambit of direct taxes, and it is this 3% which was already eligible to pay taxes. So it's not that they have had an increase in their income. This is largely that part of the population which was evading the taxes. So on this front, definitely there has been an achievement and direct taxes have risen. So that is the first analysis with regards to direct taxes. Now coming to the analysis with respect to the indirect taxes. Now here you need to understand that the indirect taxes have risen, especially in the backdrop of the GST. And an estimate has been given that there has been a 50% increase of indirect taxpayers. So that is the entire analysis. Another thing which is important is that both of these, the direct taxes and the indirect taxes, is going to lead to an interest in the tax GDP ratio, an increase in the tax GDP ratio. Now this tax GDP ratio in the country has been stagnated since the 1980s, and despite the fact that since 1980s on an average India has a growth rate of 6.5%. So if this economy was growing, then why was not the tax revenue collection of the government increasing? This was a major cause of concern, and so in the backdrop of increasing both direct taxes as well as indirect taxes, the tax GDP ratio is bound to increase. So that is one advantage which has been given here. Another thing which has been analyzed is with regards to a rising oil prices. This is a global phenomenon, and oil prices are continuously rising. In the past also we've discussed an editorial on why is it that the oil prices are rising and how should India prepare itself for that. So that is another story, but you should know that in the backdrop of rising oil prices, two things are largely impacted. One is the fiscal deficit of the government, which is already stressed. So with the rising import bill, the fiscal deficit is bound to widen. Another thing is the current account deficit, which is also going to rise because the import bills are going to supersede the exports, and as a result of which the current account deficit is also going to widen. So in this respect, this rise in tax bases and tax revenue is something that is a plus for the government because it can help bridge the fiscal deficit, and indeed it is in the interest of the country. So that is what has been analyzed. Now, seeing the benefits of this rising taxes, some other steps is what has been advocated. First is with regards to the direct taxes, what the government can do. Now, to further improve the direct taxes, the government should take some hard stands. For example, it should prune some blanket exemptions that it has given to certain sectors. For example, the agriculture sector has a blanket exemption from paying taxes. So indeed, the agricultural sector is distressed, but it's not that all the farmers are distressed. It is the small and the marginal farmer which is distressed in agriculture, and there is a section of farmer which is highly prosperous. So those farmers should be brought under the ambit of the direct taxes, and a blanket ban is something that should be done away with. So this is what has been advocated. Another thing which has been advocated is that the government should use something called of a big data, and greater mining of data should be done to further bring into the net the tax evaders. So that is what the government should do with regards to direct taxes. Also, with respect to the indirect taxes, what the government should do is that it should do away with the teething problems that GST is facing, and it should make GST more robust and more comprehensive. For example, ideas like the e-way bills, which we have discussed in the past in GST, is something that is going to make the entire process of GST smooth, and when this is done, then indeed indirect taxes will also improve. So that is what is the entire analysis of this editorial. Of course, you should know that what is the result of demonetization and GST, as well as you should have an understanding of the revenue part of the government. So that is the importance of this editorial. Now coming to the next article, a roadmap for renewal. The opinion is that will the budget address the concerns raised in economic survey, or will it go its own way? Now, largely this editorial is about what the budget should do, but we shall not be discussing this editorial from that perspective because the budget is indeed due, and we'll soon come to know that what is there in the budget and what is not there in the budget. We will discuss this editorial from a newer perspective, which is that of the warnings which the economic survey has given. These warnings are with regards to the economy of India, and so these can also be understood as the major challenges which the Indian economy is facing. So that is the importance of this editorial. Now coming to the warnings, the first warning is with regards to populism. Now here the economic survey has made a case that this is the last full term budget of the government, and so in this regard there may be a tendency in the government to go for populism, but this populist moves can further widen the fiscal burden of the government and further widen the fiscal deficit of the government. Not only that, it was also going to have an impact on the bond markets, which we had seen that the government's decision to take more loans from the banks by issuing more bonds had impacted the bond markets, and the bond prices had fallen, which had also impacted the banks, and the banks had even requested the RBI that it has suffered severe losses due to the falling bond prices in the bond markets, and wanted to stagger its losses. So that was one situation. So these populist measures have immense impact on the economy, both with regards to fiscal deficit as well as due to the bond markets. Also, if the bond markets are impacting the banks, then this results in another situation where the interest rates are increased. And if the interest rates are increased, then it is again going to impact the government most. Why? Because the government is the biggest borrower from the banks. And if there is any hike in the interest rate, then the liability of the government towards the banks increases and their interest bill increases. So that is one issue which has been raised here. And this is a cyclical effect. So this is something that needs to be controlled. And in this regard, a modest expenditure is what the government has to do, more in line with an economic understanding rather than a populist attitude. So that is what has been advocated here. Another warning is with regards to a melt up. Now here the economic survey has warned that there is a unprecedented rise, there is a historic rise in the stock prices. This is both in India as well as a global phenomenon. Stock prices are rising both in India as well as globally, and also there's a rise in commodity prices. So these stocks and commodity price rise is something of a bubble, is what the survey has warned against, and it is said that this bubble can burst and the investors can face some losses. So that is the first warning. Another thing is that any rise in the stock prices causes a lot of foreign funds to come into the country. So there is an increase of dollars, and this dollar increase is being a part of the hot money is subject to sudden changes. If the prices tomorrow fall, then this money will immediately leave the economy. So this makes the rupee vulnerable. So that is one caution that the economic survey has made in this regard. Another aspect, another warning which the economic survey has given is with regards to the global factors. Now, the first global factor which is important for India is the rising oil prices. This is a repetitive concern. Here, the economic survey has said that the present government had three advantages since it's coming into power, and these three advantages, that is a lower import bill, a lower oil subsidy burden, as well as lower inflation. So these three advantages are something that the government should now expect to lose, and these advantages are now going to go. So that is one cause of concern. That is one warning which the economic survey has given. Also, any rise in the oil prices by $10 impacts the GDP growth. It lowers the GDP growth by 0.2 to 0.3%. So this is one figure which I would suggest you should remember, that any $10 increase in the oil prices decreases the GDP growth by 0.2 to 0.3%. So that is one analysis. So in this is the one of the global warnings. Another global warning is with regards to the United States Federal Reserve. Because the Federal Reserve, which is the central bank of the US, is adopting a tightening policy. So once the US Federal Reserve is adopting a tightening policy, what is going to happen is that the dollars will start flowing back to US. Because of the higher interest rates, there will be a tendency that the investors will take the money back from countries and they are going to deposit in US. So this moving out of the dollars from the economy will have a tendency to destabilize the Indian economy, and this is going to have global impacts. So that is another global warning which the economic survey has quoted. So that is important. Another thing is with regards to some domestic factors. Now there are some domestic warnings which the economic survey has highlighted. For example, there is a problem of job creation in the country. There is a need to revive private investment in the country. Also, there is a problem of reviving exports in the country, especially in the backdrop of increasing global demand for exports. So in that backdrop, that is a challenge for our economy at present. Another thing is that the economy needs to focus on the rural and agricultural aspects, because there is a huge distress in these sectors of the economy. So that is what is been advocated in the economic survey. Another thing is that the economic survey has advocated for bringing banking sector reforms to ensure better health of the banking sector. So those are some domestic factors which the economic survey has advocated for. Another thing which the economic survey has advocated for is with regards to the inequality in the country. Time and again we are seeing that several reports have been quoting that inequality in the country is rising. The most recent being the Oxfam report, which was released in the World Economic Forum, and as per this report, 1% of the Indian population owns 73% of India's wealth. So you should know this figure. 1% owns 73% of the wealth. So indeed, this is a stark issue of inequality in the country, and this is something that the Indian economy needs to address. So that is what has been analyzed. Another thing that has been raised, another warning which has been raised by the economic survey, is with regards to the tax disputes in the country. Now this is something that is important. Here the economic survey has made a case that the rising tax disputes in the country are affecting the ease of doing business within the country. And there is a figure that has been given which says that 8.2 lakh crore, this huge sum, is what is stuck and locked up in the tax disputes. And so it is of utmost importance that these tax disputes are resolved, and this sum is what is released. So that is one analysis. Another thing is with regards to administration of tax disputes. Now tax disputes are largely addressed by tribunals. Now here a case is made that first and foremost, the decisions taken by the tribunals are largely reaching the courts, and so the utility of the tribunals is what is defeated. Another thing is that the tax officers who have to give a judgment are very, very afraid to give their judgments, because there is a reluctance on their part, primarily because they are fearing an accusation of collusion or corruption. So in this regard, the morale of the bureaucracy is something that is low, and so they are unwilling to give decisions in this regard. So all of this is resulting in a huge backlog of tax disputes. So indeed, this matter needs to be resolved and looked into. So that is something that the economic survey has warned. Another thing that the economic survey has warned is with regards to the pendency in patents. Now, time and again, the government has been asserting that it needs innovation in the country, and it is stressing that it would welcome any innovation in the country. But you need to understand that the ground and practical difficulties in innovation is with regards to patents. It is difficult to get a patent in the country, and there is a huge amount of backlog and pendency in this regard also. So this is something that needs to be addressed, and patent claims should be given immediately. So that is something that the economic survey has advocated. Now, all of these problems, as I mentioned before, all of these warnings are the challenges to the economy. And so if there is ever an opportunity for you to discuss the major challenges which the Indian economy is facing, so you can quote these. So that is the relevance of this editorial. Now, coming to the next article, the Balancing Act. Now, the context of this article is with regards to the ASEAN-India Summit. Now, we have discussed many articles on the Asia-India Summit, but one more article has been given. The author has been a former ambassador. So in that regard, I am taking up this particular editorial. So coming to the issues which have been discussed, the first issue is with regards to a clarity on achievements. Now, in the backdrop of this recent summit between India and ASEAN, and also the welcoming of ASEAN leaders as the chief guests in the Republic Day celebrations of India, in that regard, you need to understand that after this summit, now there is a much more clarity on the achievements of India-ASEAN partnership, and also there is a clarity in understanding about the shortcomings in this relationship. So this summit has ensured a lot of clarity to both the groups, and indeed this is a welcome precedent. So that is something that has been analyzed. Another thing is with regards to India's importance to ASEAN. So here the author has quoted that all the 10 leaders of the ASEAN had come to India. So this indeed is a reflection that India is of utmost importance to the ASEAN also. For example, ASEAN is viewing India as an important partner in keeping regional architecture open, balanced and inclusive, and they are seeking India's cooperation in countering China. So indeed, ASEAN has a clarity on the importance of India. Also, ASEAN's importance to India cannot be undermined. India has changed its policy from the Look East policy to now a policy of Act East policy, and also for the development of its Northeast. For development of India's economy, India is looking towards ASEAN. Another thing is that with regards to a strategic importance of the ASEAN, especially in countering China, China has made inroads into all of India's neighbors. So in this regard, India wants a better partnering with the ASEAN to balance China. So that is the strategic relevance of ASEAN for India. Another thing is that India has shifted its policy, and now the traditional distinction between immediate neighbors and extended neighborhood is something that has ended, and it has rather blurred. India now considers ASEAN as its immediate neighborhood only. So that is one analysis which has been given here. Also, with regards to the political and security front, both the groups are acknowledging each other's importance. So that is one analysis. Especially this is relevant with regards to freedom of navigation in the oceans. This is something which is of utmost importance for both the ASEAN as well as India, especially with regards to the Indian Ocean and also with regards to the South China Sea. Also, both want a clear overflight. Also, India supports ASEAN's efforts to obtain a legally binding code of conduct with the South China Sea. Now, this is something that is important because South China Sea is one of the most contentious seas, and China's assertiveness in this region is something that is worrying both the ASEAN as well as India. So, India is supporting the entire ASEAN's desire to have a code of conduct in this region. So this is something that is vital in the partnership. Another thing that is important and which has been discussed is with regards to the regional comprehensive economic partnership. Now, as I've discussed previously also, that there are a lot of issues, especially from India's side, in joining the regional comprehensive economic partnership. India feels that India is being singled out, and India's concerns are something that are not being addressed in this partnership, and this is to some extent right also. But one analysis has been given in this editorial where the author says that for India, it is unavoidable to join the regional comprehensive economic partnership. And so later or sooner, India will join this partnership. But what is important is that an acceptable bargain is what is achieved. So this is a key word, that an acceptable bargain is what is achieved for India. And for this, the ASEAN should make some efforts to make India also feel benefited from this partnership. So that is one analysis which has been given. Another thing is that an idea of moral connectivity is what has been suggested. This was the idea given by the Thailand Prime Minister, and this is an important idea. Now, by moral connectivity, he means that people should be at the center of interstate relations. This was something that we discussed yesterday also in the Gandhian thought. So this is a novel idea of moral connectivity which focuses on people at the center of any international relationship. So you should use this idea in your answers. Another thing is that the ASEAN the Delhi Declaration between India and ASEAN has called Islam as one of its key important factors in common bond. So this is something that is a de novo analysis in the India-ASEAN relationship, because previously focus was only on Buddhism and Ramayana as a connecting bond, but now even Islam has been acknowledged as a connecting bond, and it is said that Islam in India is very much old, and this can act as a link with the other Asian countries. A number of them have a huge Islamic population, so in that respect this is some newer idea. Another thing is that an opinion has been given, and this opinion has been a common opinion across several editorials, which is that it is high time that the ideas which India as well as ASEAN are advocating, that these ideas are effectively implemented. So this is the opinion which the author has given. Indeed, the article is important from India-ASEAN point of view. I have mentioned previously also that ASEAN for this year is very, very important. So that is the relevance of the editorial. Coming to the next article, fiscal populism would be really counterproductive. Now, this is an interview by the Chief Economic Advisor, Mr. Arvind Subramaniam. So definitely this interview is a good read, but all the points in this interview are something that we have already discussed. There are only two new points which I have not discussed previously. One is the idea of stigmatized capitalism. Now, the Chief Economic Advisor has given this idea, and he has said that in India there is a problem of stigmatization of the capitalist industry, and this is something that has resulted in the late or the delayed solving of the problem of twin balance sheet problem. As I had discussed it yesterday also, twin balance sheet problem is the problem of the balance sheets of both the banks as well as the corporate sector. Now, what is happening is that because the corporate sectors have stressed balance sheets, they are unable to pay back their loans to the banks, and as a result of which even the banks have become unhealthy because of rising non-performing assets. So in this regard, the Chief Economic Advisor has advocated that because it is primarily because capitalism in India is something that is not viewed with respect, and so what has happened is that the entire policy of the government of the citizen has been against capitalism, and this has impacted the government policy, and so the government has been reluctant in taking steps to address this problem of twin balance sheet problem. Also, the issue of recapitalization of banks is something that the government had been reluctant in doing because of this same issue, because it would often be seen as a step by the government to favor the corporate sector. So that is one analysis that that has been given in this interview. So this is important, and this sometime you can get an opportunity to use this term. This is a key word and this analysis. So that is the first aspect. Another thing is that the interview talks about the double-digit growth for India. Now, you know that till now India has not touched a double-digit growth. So an analysis has been drawn that can India do it? So definitely India can do it. But in this regard, what is required is not only that internal economic reforms are brought about, but what is also important is that the global economy should be in the favor of this. If the global economy is not strong, then it will become very, very difficult for India to touch a double-digit growth figure. So that is what has been analyzed here, and that is what is relevant for you in this particular piece of interview. Otherwise, if you are interested, you can go through the entire editorial. It's a good read. Now, coming to the next article, a siege of terror. The opinion is that the Taliban and the Islamic State are exposing Kabul's growing inability to keep the peace. Now, the context of this article is the worsening security situation in Afghanistan. Now, you should know some figures. For example, there have been 4 attacks in the past 10 days, and these attacks are largely being conducted by 2 major terrorist groups, that is the Islamic State as well as Taliban. So all of these are reflecting a worsening of the security situation in Afghanistan, and this is a major cause of concern. Also, previously, as we had discussed in one article, this The war in Afghanistan is the longest war in the history. It has started in the year 2001. So it's almost 16 years that this war is going on unabated and without any result. So that is the entire context of this editorial. Now, some important issues is what has been raised. The first issue is with regards to Islamic State. Now, you need to understand that Islamic State has been removed from Syria. It has been defeated in Syria. And so Islamic State is seeking territory. And if Afghanistan, if peace is not restored in Afghanistan, then this is going to be an ideal zone for Islamic State to again recoup and re-establish itself and gain territory. So that is one analysis which has been drawn in this editorial, that peace in Afghanistan is utmost importance to curb the Islamic State. So that is one analysis. Another thing is with regards to Taliban. Now, Taliban is on a rise. At present, it is estimated that Taliban is holding 1/3 of the area in Afghanistan, and indeed this is a huge area. Also, you need to understand that with regards to Taliban, is that Taliban has, because of the alienation of the people, let's come to the third point and then we'll draw a complete analysis. Now, what has happened is that this war has continued for 16 long years. And in this whole period, people have been alienated, people have suffered war, and also irresponsible air strikes by the US. All of this has resulted in a scenario where the local people in Afghanistan are alienated, and so this is something that Taliban has benefited from. It has taken the benefit of this resentment in the hearts of the people. It has tapped into this resentment and it has recouped, and it has very much strongly established itself in Afghanistan yet again. So that is what is the importance of Taliban. And another thing is that an analysis has been drawn that it is very difficult for the government to at present defeat Taliban militarily. So if government cannot attack or destroy Taliban militarily, and Taliban cannot attack the Kabul government at present, so there is a situation of stalemate in this war. So that is something that has been warned against, that this stalemate is something that needs to be broken and something needs to be done in this respect. So that is one analysis which has been given. Another analysis is with regards to Pakistan's role. Now, Pakistan is the only country which had contacts with Taliban, and it was a key player in brokering a peace deal or negotiations with Taliban. However, US has been critical of Pakistan. It has also stopped in all its military aid to Pakistan. So in this respect, Pakistan's role is weakened in this entire war zone of Afghanistan, and it is expected that Pakistan will not be an active player now. And this is something that is a cause of concern for many experts, as they believe that this is going to further worsen the situation in Afghanistan. So that is one analysis. Another thing is that there is a lack of a cohesive strategy. For example, the Afghanistan government, the US, Pakistan, Russia, China, all of them should have had a cohesive strategy in this area. But what we are seeing is that there are separate groups. For example, the Afghanistan government is having its own problems, which we've discussed in the 6th point, that the government is inherently weak, it is corrupt, and it is plagued by infighting. So all of these are problems within the government. Also, the US is lacking a clear strategy on Afghanistan. Another thing is that Russia and Iran are forming a separate nexus. So these global geopolitics is again that has resulted in a lack of a cohesive strategy on Afghanistan, and as a result of which peace has not been restored to this country. So this is a major cause of concern. Not only globally, this is something which is a major problem. Also for India, it is a huge problem, because Afghanistan is in India's neighborhood, and any rise of terrorism of Islamic State and Taliban in this region is something that is not in the interest of the region and especially India. So indeed, peace in Afghanistan is of utmost importance for both India as well as the world. So that is the importance of this editorial. Now, some questions we have included today. Any amount of discussion is not going to be very useful until unless you implement it in your writings. So I would suggest please try to attempt these 2 questions. Write the questions within the word limits, and I'm sure based on our discussion today, you will be able to attempt these questions. So that is, I hope you will try these questions today itself, and you can also write these questions, write your answers in the comment section. So it will be nice if you do that. We could review your answers in that case. Now, before we finish, some piece of information. We are starting a prelims batch, which is starting from the 5th of February 2018. It will be a comprehensive program for all prelims related syllabus, specially focused on the prelims of 2018. So all interested candidates, please do get in touch with us. This is our address and this is our phone number. So with this, we finish today's discussion. I thank you all for watching, and I hope to see you tomorrow.